Okay.
Okay, so this is talking about growing a green conscience and big and little things that we can do to save planet and people. And I want to thank you for joining us. We have three panelists today. Vanessa Johnston, who's going to be talking about green burials and how we can be environmentally conscious up until the very end, literally. And Patrick Anderson, who is signing in from California and who will be talking about electric vehicles. And Heather Beasley, who is joining us from, remind me one more time, Heather.
Pinery Water and Wastewater District in Denver, Colorado.
Yes, the Pinery Water and Waste District. So this genuinely is a conversation, and we will start with the panelists introducing themselves, and that way they kind of build a foundation in terms of their expertise, their areas of knowledge, and questions that you might want to ask them. And once the introductions are done, we'll open it up to Q&A, have a conversation about the things that we care about and the things that we can collectively do to make a difference. And then we'll close it out with final thoughts from our panelists and call it a good night. So thank you for joining us. In the comment section, we will post the norms of these conversations. I'll briefly touch on these, but this isn't a controversial topic. Sometimes we have very controversial topics. Last month, we talked about race, gender, and class, and so it can get a little bit heated. I don't imagine this will have a lot of controversy, but that's something that we always invite. So in terms of our community conversation group norms, they are exercising a deep presence practice, invoking inquiry. You know, let's be curious here. It's okay to make mistakes. We're learning, we're comfortable with conflict. So if you feel like you want to disagree or you have an alternative opinion, I invite you to share that, and we'll respect the construct of time and equity. So I do ask that if you're asking a question, that you leave room for the time for the presenters to answer those questions. And we are creating a supportive group culture, and that includes, you know, just respect for one another. And then also invite joy. We're here to explore and connect. So those are in the group chat in detail. You're welcome to reference those, but let's just have some fun tonight and learn a few things and make important connections. And with that, we'll go ahead and start it with you, Patrick, and your introduction.
Okay, so I'm Patrick Anderson, and really excited to be here tonight. I got involved. Oh, I'm getting an echo from somebody. Okay, that was Liv. She's watching as well. So anyways, I'm very excited to be here. I only got involved with sort of the electric vehicle like revolution a couple of years ago when we first saw the Mustang Mach-E, which is an electric car from Ford based off of the Mustang. And we put in our order and got excited by it, but we also decided to document our journey on YouTube. So we created a YouTube channel. We now have 2 YouTube channels that are focused on the Mach-E and then all EVs, which channel names are behind me. And it's really taken off. We've gotten really involved. We've learned more and more about EVs. We worked with Drive Electric Colorado to become EV coaches, have attended numerous like EV meetups, and we're sort of getting more and more involved in the industry as well, and tackling all of the issues that are around EVs. And as this is sort of talking about the big and the small, you know, there's a lot of big policy issues, big changes that are coming ahead. But there are a lot of things that you can do on a individual level to make change. And it doesn't have to be just electric vehicles, but the whole idea is reducing our carbon footprint when it comes to transportation. And one example that I've been thinking about a lot lately is we live in northern San Diego County, and we've had to make trips about once a week to LA for the past 7 weeks for some medical issues. And in doing so, I'm realizing that little trip I wouldn't have really thought about before. Like you just put in your gas and you just use gas as you need it. But now we're doing electricity, which sort of compares to, I can see what electricity I'm using at home on a daily basis, especially because we just got solar. And it turns out like we're using like 3 times the amount of electricity we use in one day to get to LA and back as we do just to run our home for a day. So when you start thinking about those terms of like, wow, that's just a quick short trip, I probably wouldn't have thought about it before. It's like a couple of gallons of gas, but now I'm like, well, I'm using more energy to propel ourselves down the road to go 50 miles than I am to power my house for a whole day. So that's one of the things that I try to look at is like approaching like, how can I reduce the number of trips, but also there is a lot of exciting stuff coming down the pipeline with electric vehicles. There's a lot of incentives, and it ranges not only for the big giant Ford F-150 Lightning, but it also goes down to, there's some great incentives for e-bikes, but then also circling that back around to the big picture as well. And how is this going to affect our communities? There's a lot of changes that need to be made. One, to make sure that we are transitioning in a smart way for all of society, but also to make sure some of these underserved communities are still have a seat at the table and that we don't forget about them. One of the stats that everybody's talking about is like last year, 7% of new car sales were electric vehicles, which is great. But I believe, if I remember correctly, about 70% of the sales of all cars last year were used cars. A lot of people buy used cars, and less than 1% of those used car sales include EVs. So there's a lot of, these new tax incentives, for the most part, they are only for new electric cars. There are now finally some that are coming for used vehicles, which is great. But then there's also, it's like, even if we can help get these vehicles out there, then there's the charging infrastructure, and that's all public infrastructure as well as in the home. So less than 2/3 of Americans actually own their home. So that means if you're renting a house, how do you charge your car if there's no outlet in the garage that can charge an electric vehicle? And typically it costs anywhere from $500 to $1,000 to install that in the garage, which if you're a homeowner, that's an investment. It's very smart. But if you're renting and you have like a 1-year lease, does that make sense for you? And then there's a whole nother level if you start going into multifamily dwellings and literally just being no option at all to have any charging at home. So then, of course, public infrastructure becomes very important, and there's a lot of hurdles in getting that public infrastructure in places that we need it. And a lot of times right now, those EV cells are in the wealthier suburban neighborhoods, but we're leaving out a lot of urban neighborhoods that have no way to, even if people wanted to buy and utilize an electric vehicle. We'll touch base on some of that. I know that's where a lot of the hot topics are. We are also now just getting into electric bikes, and we're going to start reviewing electric bikes and try to think about some other alternatives. As I was saying, it's like to make even a short trip, we're using a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, whether it's gas or electric, to propel ourselves in these big 4-wheel monsters. And we're looking at, there's some great ways where we can take an electric bike, take a regular bike, but sometimes you don't want to get sweaty or whatever. So being able to use an electric bike to as an actual form of transportation is going to be huge. And I'm very excited to see like Denver is doing some e-bike rebates for people that will help that out. And if we can get more people out of cars, because that's really the goal. Like we talk about like all of these EV incentives, what we're really trying to do is reduce the amount of people being propelled around with fossil fuels. And if that can be with an electric vehicle, that's great. If it's public transportation, that's great. If it's walking or riding a bicycle, that's even better. So and I think that's about it for me. We'll talk about some, when we get to the end, some things that you can do locally, yourself individually, and hopefully we'll help you find a way that you can somehow get into the EV revolution.
All right, thank you. Heather, if you'll start your introduction, that'd be great.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Heather Beasley. I'm the district manager of Pinery Water and Wastewater District. We provide safe drinking water and clean wastewater back to the environment down in Douglas County, Colorado. So my history, I'm by schooling a civil engineer and got into the water industry after graduating college. I have a degree in physics, a degree in engineering, and then a master's in water resources. So I've always been very engaged and connected to not only, just the environment, but particularly water. I've always loved being around water, in water, thinking about water. And so I pursued that with my master's degree. But originally when I got out of college, started with engineering design, typical stuff, roads, bridges, stuff like that. And then transitioned into municipal water supply with pump stations and underground storage tanks and wastewater treatment plants, and then dabbled in water resources in Colorado, which is a very complex issue in terms of the prior appropriation doctrine and how water rights are administered and shared for beneficial use in Colorado. So I did that for a while, and now I've kind of merged all of them together in managing a utility for the community. The biggest, I guess the biggest flag I carry is efficiency, and that's why we're all here tonight, right? To be efficient in using our resources, our electricity, our bodies, Vanessa, our water, but efficiency is a discussion I have in my job, in my personal life every day with everything that I do. And there's so many ways that we can be much more efficient with our water use here in Colorado than we are currently doing. So there's a lot of capacity for improvement here.
Thank you, Heather. And Vanessa.
Hello. Thanks for having me here tonight, Angela. It's an honor to be here and talk about some ways that we can make a difference in our environment. I'm an end-of-life doula, and what that means is that I provide non-medical support to people who are at the end of life. And that could be emotional, spiritual, or informational support for people with life-limiting diagnosis and their loved ones. And so part of that being a resource is helping folks decide what they want to do when it comes time for final disposition. And so basically, what do we do with our bodies? And there are lots and lots of choices, and some of them are really, really new. And so I thought it would be helpful to have just a visual for you all. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here and get a slideshow. Can you see that? Let's see. I can't hear anybody, sorry.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. Let's see. Well, try again. How about now? Yeah? Okay. All right. So yeah, this is kind of a loaded topic for a lot of people. I wish it was a bit more neutral like Patrick and Heather, but it does, like transportation and water, it affects us all, right? So these are kind of visuals to go with the current options that we have for final disposition. And most people know about, you know, the traditional burial, but they don't often think about the impact on our environment. And you know, people make their own decisions based on religious preferences, cultural preferences, family tradition. And while I don't have any judgment about any of that, I do want people to be informed about their choices. So here's just some information about traditional burial, which means the body is embalmed, and that formaldehyde is what embalming fluid is used for, and 800,000 gallons of that goes into the ground every year whenever you're considering traditional burial. And then also hardwoods and concrete in the ground. So that is definitely not good for our environment. And you know, a long time ago, people didn't really think about those kind of things, but now it's kind of incumbent upon us to think about it. A different kind of burial is a green burial, and that means that there's no embalming, which actually is not required by law anywhere. And this is when you place the body in a cotton or silk burial shroud, and it just naturally degrades. And people of the Jewish faith have always done this. They've always had green burials, so no embalming there. And you can go to the greenburialcouncil.org and find different ones in every state in our country. So it's pretty widely available now. The biggest thing to remember is that none of the concrete or metal or hardwoods or embalming fluid are going into the earth. So that's a good thing. And there are other positive reasons to do green burial, because it's much more family centered and allows people to be involved in a different way. And that allows us to kind of process that loss that has happened as well. Another option for final disposition is cremation. This has really increased in popularity since the early 80s. More people are doing this now. And while there are some good things about it, that it's cheaper, it's a simpler process, you have ashes, it's also very costly to the environment. And all of those toxic chemicals that were going into the ground with traditional burial are now being released into the air. So, you know, the sulfur dioxide, the heavy metals, mercury is all going into the air. And it's a high use of fossil fuels just to run crematoriums. So this is something that maybe people don't think about when they're trying to choose for themselves what they would like. But to be informed, you should know that this is the truth of what fire cremation represents. Now here in Colorado and in 19 other states in our country, there's a new thing called water cremation. You may have also heard of aquamation, biomation, resumation, a lot of names. And this is what the vessel looks like. This is from Beasley Cremation in Denver, and it has a low environmental impact. And what happens is there is a chemical process that is used to degrade the body, and what results is cremains, so very similar to a fire cremation, that the family has something tangible to remember their person by. But then there's also a liquid that is a non-toxic bionutrient liquid that can be used for fertilizer, and so that's sent to here in Denver to places like Half Moon Farms. That's a flower farm for flowers and trees. And so those of you that want to know a little bit more about how water cremation works, here's the explanation. It takes about 4 to 6 hours to complete. And this is based on, you know, what farmers used to do with their cattle way back in the day. They would use the alkaline or lye to break down the bodies. And this is kind of what this process is based on. And there's a little bit more about what it looks like. And so, you know, it's faster than a fire cremation as well. But the most important thing is that it's not sending all those toxic chemicals into the air. The newest thing that we have is natural organic reduction. It is now legal in 6 states, and it is also called human composting, body composting, recomposition, or terramation. And what you're seeing here is the end result of it. Because it's pretty amazing that you have a body and it's placed in a vessel very similar to this one here and covered with natural things like alfalfa and straw. And it, just like compost, is turned for 90 days. And then everything breaks down through this natural process that's just sped up. And you have soil that doesn't have any DNA in it, it's pH neutral, and you can use it to grow flowers and trees and things like that. And this picture is from the Colorado Burial Preserve in Florence, Colorado, where it's a conservation land. Here are some other pictures from places that offer this. As I said, it's very new, so there are only 4 companies so far, 2 in Washington, 1 in Oregon, and 1 in Colorado. They do take people from other states, except for the Oregon one, Earth. They only are available to Oregon residents. But hopefully this is something that will become more popular with people, because it is just the most sustainable option and the best option for our planet. And this is what the different vessels look like at those providers. And each person's soil represents a metric ton of carbon saved. So it's pretty significant. You know, natural organic reduction uses 1/8 the energy of fire cremation and saves over a metric ton of CO2 per person. And that's the equivalent of the energy required to power 49,000 homes for a year, or the equivalent of 10 million seedlings growing into trees for 10 years. So it's not insignificant. And, you know, if just one person made this choice, this is what it represents. And so when we're talking about choices that we can actually make that will make a difference, this is definitely one of them. And then for people that really want to know the numbers, this is the difference between the different disposition types as far as emissions. You have conventional burial on the left, then flame cremation, alkaline hydrolysis, which is that water cremation. And then you can see it starts to actually give back to the earth and regenerate things with green burial. And then eaten by wolves is there in between. And natural reduction is the best as far as giving back to the earth. And so this is becoming more popular in other states. If you're interested and want to know more about it, those are the new states. And then we can talk later about one thing that you can do. And if you have more questions, that's my information too. So let's see if I can stop sharing there.
Thank you, Vanessa. I don't know why that conversation makes me laugh.
It's a coping mechanism that helps.
Is that what it is? A coping mechanism?
Yes,
because I just found myself like wanting to giggle through the composting and the but it's truly fascinating. And I have not, until I have really not heard about all of these options. So I mean, I knew that you could, you know, kind of just be buried in the ground, but learning about a water burial and composting are all brand new. So I really appreciate you sharing and bringing this. It seems like such an easy thing to do, and yet so incredibly impactful. So thank you. And I don't mean to diminish the importance of that by giggling at all, but
that's okay. Dark humor is good too.
Yes. I was thinking, now that's a great use for water. So we will go ahead and open it up to questions. Is there anyone who would like to start with a question for our panelists? Heather, I had a question for you to start, given the enormous amount of rain that we've had recently. And like this level of rain, what does that mean long term? Are there cycles where there's rain? Because it feels like, you know, we've been battling droughts and now we're battling saturation. And I'm just wondering what that might mean.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Good question. I think there's about 3 things I want to touch on with the rain. First of all, and I don't know if you guys have seen any reports, I basically live my life by water years because I'm always concerned about how much is falling from the sky and how much we have to push out in our pipes. But we haven't got, the month of May ties the record for the amount of rain received, if you guys remember this, in September of 2013, when we had the massive flooding kind of in the Rocky Mountain National Park area, the Poudre, and into the middle lower South Platte River. Huge, devastating floods. That's the amount of rain we got basically over 2 days in kind of in the southern Denver metro area. So what does that mean besides, you know, potential damage to property, to people, all of that? For our water resources, it means that they're less strained. I had mentioned earlier that Colorado operates under a prior appropriation doctrine for their water resources, which means that basically the first person to come and say they can put water to beneficial use for the community gets the first water right. So that's, if you're there first in time, you have the most senior water right. And if you head up to the water commissioner today and say, I can put some water to beneficial use, you're going to be last on the totem pole. Like, you will get your water after everybody else before you gets their water. So it puts less pressure on it because the people who have the most senior water rights right now, they're satisfied. So everybody in Colorado who says they can put water to beneficial use can do that right now without constraints of their water rights and what their decrees through water court have told them. Another thing that it's helped is not only the rain we've gotten recently, but the snowpack. So we get rain in the metro area, but up in the mountains, it's snow. And that our mountains are the biggest reservoir for water in the Western United States. There's a Colorado River Compact was penned in the 1920s, and that is an agreement between 7 states, Mexico, and the Native American tribes. And it lays out how much water each state gets. There's the 4 upper basin states, meaning that's where the water originates from. You have Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. And then you have the 3 lower states that really rely on the water that comes from the upper states: California, Arizona, Nevada. The upper basin states gets to take their water first, although there are limits. But as you know, in the recent years, we've been battling drought, not just in Colorado, but the entire Western United States has been battling drought. And it's put a lot of strain on that compact. The compact was penned in a relatively wet cycle. So everyone believed they had more water than they actually did. So it's been extremely tense and extremely strained in the past 10 years. And the levels in Lake Mead that not only provides water storage, but also hydroelectricity have declined. I mean, historically low levels. And so the rains out in California, the snowpack in the upper basin states have helped to ease the tension while those 7 states have been renegotiating the Colorado River Compact. So they've reached a deal whereby the lower basin states are going to cut back about 13% of their entitled water per the original compact. They're going to cut back 13% of their water use in 2024. So, you know, they're going to get more efficient. I don't exactly know what it means for the upper states. I think the upper states used less of the water than the lower states did, which makes sense. You got California, you got Phoenix, you've got some of the most bountiful agricultural lands in the valleys of California and some in Arizona. So they've used historically a lot more of the water than the upper states have. And the third thing that it helps us, like me and you individually, is we're going to save money, hopefully, because I haven't turned my irrigation system on yet. I kind of challenge myself every year. When's the last possible, like, how long can I wait before I turn my sprinkler system on? And typically I'm struggling to get to June 1st, but I haven't even thought about it this year. And I probably won't turn them on for a good 2-3 more weeks. I could go to July 1st before I turn my sprinklers on. And so that saves me money, because if anybody's looked at their water bill, the water that you use inside throughout the year is relatively cheap. If you compare it to, it costs me about $2.50 if I get, a good deal at 7-Eleven to buy a liter of water. It cost me $2.20 to get 1,000 gallons of water out of my tap. So that is really, really inexpensive, safe water. When you water your grass in the summertime, depending on how much you use in a month, you could be paying 8 times that much for the same 1,000 gallons of water. Just because it's really hard in the summertime with the stress of the heat and low precipitation, it's really hard to deliver that water. So I'm going to be saving a lot of money this year because I don't have to water my plants, and hopefully everybody else is also not watering. I've at Pinery, I've seen a huge decrease in our demand as compared to the same time last year and the year before. So people are taking their cues, and they're not watering like they used to. So it's a good thing. I love the rain.
I do too. I do too. I never complain about it. I know that Douglas County in particular was like their aquifers were being depleted. Does like this kind of rain, what are the years of gain that creates?
Well, there are, Douglas County in particular, we sit on top of some non-renewable aquifers, meaning it's just like the natural gas. You mine it to extinction, it's gone. It doesn't replenish. They're 2,000 feet down. They're hydraulically disconnected from anything that's falling from the sky. They also have the alluvial aquifers, so Cherry Creek, Plum Creek, the South Platte. What you see on the surface is just a fraction of what all the water that's actually flowing in what we call the alluvium. If you can imagine this kind of like an iceberg, you see the tip of the iceberg on the water surface, but there's 80% of the iceberg is underneath the water. Same thing with our rivers and our streams. 80% of the water is flowing in the sands underneath the surface. So that is replenished by what falls from the sky and the snow that comes down from the mountains. So when in our industry, we kind of refer to it as holes in the aquifer, meaning there's a well that pulls water out of the sands of a riverbank or a stream bank, and it creates a hole in the aquifer. So we've sucked the water out of that portion of it. When these rains come through, they kind of fill it back in. So it's almost like potholes in a street, if you think about it that way. So all this rain is filling up all of those potholes in the alluvium. So it's making, when we do draw water out of the alluvium, it's making it easier because we're not pulling the water surface down to make it harder for the pumps to lift it back out.
Okay. Well, good. I hope it keeps raining. I know that there are a lot of wet basements.
Yes, my house actually got pummeled here about an hour ago. So I had to check all of my window wells and stuff. But if it rained 30 minutes every 4 days, I would be the happiest person alive.
I know, me too. Me too. Rain is a beautiful thing. And when I ran for office, one of the things they talked about is the most controversial issue in Colorado is the issue of water.
Mhm.
And there was a feeling of scarcity and scarcity. I sometimes think when it rains a lot, that it gives a false sense of security.
Well,
that
it does,
we have it.
because Douglas County in particular, it built up on non-renewable resources. So it has urban level development with water resources that can't keep up with that type of demand. So there's been a huge push since the early 2000s, 2004, 2006, kind of culminating with what we call the WISE partnership, the Water Infrastructure and Supply Efficiency. And that's a regional partnership with Aurora Water, Denver Water, and then 10 of the South Metro water providers to share not only infrastructure, but water supply. So Aurora and Denver pull some of their water supplies over from the Western Slope. So, oh geez. Lake Dillon is a huge water supply for Denver Water. So in times like this, where there's ample water supply, it's kind of shared all the way around. So then the South Metro water providers who may only have non-renewable resources in their portfolio, they now don't have to draw any this year. They can get some of those shared resources from that partnership. So raining is good. Those partnerships are good. And the South Metro water providers have been focused on transitioning from that non-renewable resource to those renewable resources. You'll see lots of different projects kind of in the northeast portion of the state where they're bringing water on the South Platte all the way back down to Douglas County. Multi-million-dollar projects to move water around. But that's so the non-renewable portion of the water stays as an emergency supply, something in complete extreme drought that we can tap onto. But if we use it in normal times and we use it all up, then we don't have any fail-safe, anything to fall back on.
Right. And what do you see as the biggest water waste?
Outdoor irrigation, hands down. We live in a high desert, so we should not have, well, again, my personal opinion, should not have bluegrass. We shouldn't drive around our communities and see carpets of green, because this is a high desert and those plants aren't native. Those plants are very high water use, and we should be transitioning our outdoor landscaping so that it's native, so that it can survive on just the water that falls from the sky here. If we could do those things, we could definitely make some changes in the right direction.
And I know some new municipalities are requiring that developers xeriscape and they don't put in lawns. So
Correct.
probably
Yeah,
not fast enough, but
not fast enough. Town of Castle Rock at the end of 2022 passed an ordinance where no new residential homes could only put xeriscape landscape in their front yard and only 500 square feet of high water use turf in their backyard. So that's a step in the right direction.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions for Heather from our participants here? And it doesn't have to be limited to Heather if you have some other questions too. And also, if you would prefer to leave them in the chat box instead of ask them, you know, that's always an opportunity also. I just have to look at those.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Patrick, because I'm looking at e-bikes. Any kind of advice on what to look for, or kind of incentives or anything like that?
I don't know too many of the specific incentives. I do, since we moved, I'm not keeping up on Denver
that's
as
right, yeah.
much. But yeah, you could probably just Google like multiple times. So like one be like Denver e-bike incentives, Colorado e-bike incentives, because sometimes they come from different sources.
Mhm.
Same thing with electric cars. And actually electric cars, there's a great resource I'll drop into the chat for looking at for cars. The other thing that is becoming an issue with e-bikes is e-bike safety. And that's in regards, and there's actually something related in the chat. So I'll cover both of those. E-bike safety, and it's sort of two-pronged. One is a lot of these companies are, sprouting up out of nowhere. And what they're literally doing is ordering e-bikes from China, sight unseen, setting up a website and then selling them. And it just, they've never seen the bike, they've never tested the bike, and then it shows up at your house and it's directly from China. So that's one of the things that I would advise people is like try to find reputable companies, check out reviews, which is why we're going to get into reviews. The first bike we're looking at, they're pricey, so I definitely don't recommend it for everybody, but they are assembled here in the US. Every single battery is assembled and checked out in their facility, because that's one of the things that's become an issue. Like in New York City, people charging the batteries all the time. And one, they weren't designed for that. And two, they're not necessarily the best quality. So if you do get an e-bike, check the origins of it, but also, follow the manufacturer's recommendations. And like with a car, it has, thousands of dollars of equipment to make sure the battery is okay. But just as like your cell phone, like you wouldn't plug in your cell phone and leave it for 2 weeks in between uses. You would sort of go like, hey, I should probably unplug this for a bit. So that's one of the things they're sort of recommending is don't leave it plugged in all the time. And there actually needs to be a little bit of maintenance in the off season. So if you're in Colorado and like I'm not riding between November and February or March, don't leave it plugged in the whole time, but don't leave it unplugged the whole time. So like, plug it in like once a month, just check it out, make sure it's okay. The other thing with safety, and this was mentioned in the chat, and I used to live in Colorado. I was a road cyclist, but it was extremely dangerous trying to use it as transportation, like in downtown Denver. And it's something that I've advocated for. When I was on the city council in Centennial, I advocated for more bike lanes, and specifically protected bike lanes, because just having a couple of pieces of paint on the road or a couple of stripes of paint on the road doesn't really protect cyclists. So, that sort of, going back to what I was saying, like the big picture, we could talk about like you as an individual buying an e-bike, but the big picture is like if we're going to encourage people to take e-bikes or walk or bicycles, we need better sidewalks, we need better bike infrastructure to be put into place. And the good news is, like from the federal government on down, a lot of the transportation dollars, they're saying like you can't just, if you're a city and you're getting money from the federal government, you can't just take 100% of that and apply it to more lanes on the expressway. You have to set aside, and it varies depending on the grant, but maybe 10, 15, 25% that has to be designated to go to bike lanes or public transportation, sidewalks, whatever. So that's something that I would advocate, that you advocate for at all levels, through your city council, through state legislature, to try to get more funding for those resources. And some of it is changing some of the ways bicyclists are treated on the roads as well, because I actually had times where I called into the sheriff department and complained in Arapahoe County, somebody's cutting us off, yelling at us, throwing stuff out the window, and they just took it as like, okay, well, there's not much we can do. What do you want us to do? And I'm like, you're the sheriff. When somebody has a 4,000-pound vehicle against me on my bicycle, to me, that's like assault with a deadly weapon, if you ask me. So it's changing those attitudes as well. Like, you know, we have people, you know, when somebody cuts me off in a car, that's dangerous. When I'm in a car, and it's lethal when I'm on a bicycle. So there's a lot of stuff like that I think we could address.
You know, one of the things I'd like to see, you know how communities now have walk scores, and it's a big deal when you're buying a house to look at, you know, what's the walk score. I'd love to see cities that have a bike score, and that has to do with, you know, how many protected bikeways there are, things like that. I know that did you say it's $7,500 and tax incentive for EV cars?
Yeah, and actually in Colorado, I'm starting on July 1st. Like I want to move back to Colorado just for this. So it's $7,500 from the federal government, and there's some stipulations on income, which most people don't have to worry about, and the cost of the vehicle, which a lot of people have to worry about, and then where the car is manufactured. It gets very complicated, but if you pick the right car, you can get $7,500 from the federal government, but you can also get $5,000 to $7,500 back from Colorado as well. So the one that I wanted to give as an example is the Chevy Bolt, which unfortunately they're going to stop making those in a few months because Chevy's doing some shifting in their factories. But you can literally get a Chevy Bolt for $29,000 and then get $15,000 back in tax credits.
Wow.
So that literally, like, it's not at the point of purchase, which can be hard because you're like, you still have to come up with a down payment and make the payments on a $30,000 car. But when you get to next, April, you could literally get back $7,500 from the state of Colorado as well as the federal government. And the stipulation in Colorado is going to be, it has to be a vehicle under $30,000 to get the $7,500. Between $30,000 and $80,000, you get $5,000 back. So
Okay.
some really great stuff though. Yeah.
What about, are there tax incentives for e-bikes?
Yeah. Nothing from the federal government, but, and in fact, people often ask about like electric motorcycles. There's no federal tax rebate for electric motorcycles, but there are local municipalities and state governments that are doing e-bike rebates. Denver is one of the first that's, and I forget what their e-bike rebate is, but they also have some that say like it's one amount if you make above a certain income, and then you get more if you make below a certain income, and trying to make those more affordable for everybody.
Yeah, and a good friend of mine was a recipient of one of the Denver e-bikes. So that's a really revolutionary program. Yeah,
I think it's really great. And I've gotten into, I'm on Twitter a lot, so I've gotten into some debates with people that basically worry about the dangers of e-bikes in regards to we're getting more people on e-bikes and then it's dangerous for pedestrians. And it's like, yes, those are issues we have to consider. But I think overall, like, I am envious of the people in Holland and what a great bike culture they've set up there. Because it's also stuff like there's secure parking in their downtown areas for e-bikes or bicycles in general. And that's something here. Like we thought about, like, well, we could bike down to the harbor from our house. And speaking of walk score, one of the reasons we bought the house that we did, we're about 8 miles inland from the coast, but there is a bike lane, bike path attached to the park that's attached to our neighborhood. So we could literally get on that and not touch or not be near any cars at all for all 8 miles down to the harbor. No stoplights, no crossing the roads, nothing like that. It's they go under the major roads that we have to cross. So it's something that we considered, and we're very, very lucky and fortunate to be able to find this house. And something that I've, trying to get people to think about those things of, like, if you're investing in a house, maybe look many years down the road and see, like, how is transportation going to look?
Mhm.
And just putting more cars on the road is not going to help.
Yeah. So those are some great points. Thank you. Carla, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
I know there's a couple of great e-bike places in the area too, and they're very helpful. They're incredibly helpful and
Mhm.
knowledgeable. So I might go with you.
Yeah, I think there's one in Aspen Grove called Rad Bikes or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard good things about them. I don't know much.
Is that Rad Power bikes, maybe?
I think so.
Okay. I think they have a facility out here. We're trying to, we took a tour of the electric bike company in Huntington Beach, and I think Rad Power has a facility out there. So that's our goal, is to not just, get a bike out of a box and review it. We want to go and tour the facility, talk to the people that design it, check out their testing procedures, and then we're going to test them as well, because a lot of them make some wild claims of like, it has 40 miles range. I'm like, well, we're going to test it and see if it actually has a 40-mile range.
Yeah.
That's great.
That sounds like a fun project.
It'll fill out some lunch breaks, because we have our day jobs. So we'll make a video on our lunch break, and then it'll be fun.
Heather, a question is coming in from Jane McPeters about gray water, and are there plans to make better use of gray water?
Jane, are you talking about Pinery in specifically, or just in general? Because if it's Pinery specifically, no, we don't have any plans to make use of gray water. I do know of some municipalities that, like Castle Rock, who have incorporated some. The Colorado Water Plan does outline some ways that you can use gray water in your household. It's just, it's tough because the water providers are responsible for providing safe, clean water. So when there's a gray water system, making sure that that's safe inside the house gets a little unruly. So the use of gray water is tough. The industries I've seen it applied mostly are car washes. Pretty much all of the car washes in Colorado, at least any new ones, all have a gray water system where they catch the water, recycle it, and all of that. But in terms of residential use for gray water, it's a little tougher.
How is the public assured that the water that comes out of our tap is safe?
Well, so every water provider in the United States is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Water Act that was issued in the 1970s. The federal government then has given authority to the state government. So Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is the one that regulates all of the Colorado water providers. And we have permits based on the water source, the water treatment, and in those permits, all of the constituents in the water are regulated as well. So we test our water routinely, sometimes once a week for certain parts of our permit, sometimes once every 9 years for other types. It depends on, if there's ever been any detection of some of these contaminants in the water. And so the way you can tell is every water provider is mandated to publish what's called the Consumer Confidence Report. So by June 30th of every year, every water provider in the state of Colorado, or actually in the country, provides the Consumer Confidence Report to all of their customers, and it's published on their website. And you can read that report. For us, Pinery, it's 5 to 6 pages. Talks about everything that we test for in our water, if we've detected it, what levels we've detected it at, how it compares to the maximum contaminant level, how often we test, and all of that.
And is it, I mean, having gone through all of those tests, do you have any concern about contaminants that might be in the water or the safety of?
I don't know. At Pinery, I absolutely, I don't. I carry a gallon water jug, and every day I just fill it up from the tap and I put it in the refrigerator so I have cold water. I believe in tap water. I mean, and we talked about this earlier, Angela, that the bottled water you buy at 7-Eleven is tap water from somewhere. It doesn't just magically come out of the ground purified. It's tap water, and that tap water is regulated by the states and the federal government. So do you want to, and believe me, I've bought bottled water before. Sometimes convenience trumps everything, but by and large, I walk around with a water bottle full of tap water every day, everywhere I go. So yes, I'm absolutely 100% secure in saying that we provide clean, safe drinking water for our community.
It really is, our most precious resource. And
It absolutely is. It really, I mean, I think about this and I talk to my team about this every day. We hold the health of our community in our hands every single day. Not just, the grass that's growing, but their health. It's life or death. I mean, we could be slowly poisoning people if we're not careful. I mean, it is not a job or a responsibility that I take lightly, nor that my team takes lightly. We are a 24/7 operation, and we are responsible for the health of our entire community.
well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the work that you do. It is important, and it's undervalued and underappreciated, but absolutely essential.
I have a quote, and I got it from, oh geez, the title of the book is slipping my mind, but the book is about the water partnership in California. What's that called? But the quote kind of goes like, the further you draw people away from their resources, the less they're valued. So how often does anybody think about getting up at midnight and turning on your water, just getting a glass of water, or going to the bathroom? We're drawn away from our resources. Like, we don't have to go to the outhouse, and we don't have to carry a jug of water from the creek every day like we used to. So because we're further away from our resource, it in our mind holds less value. There is a sentiment in the community that, and I agree with this, everyone deserves clean drinking water, but there is a sentiment that it should be it should be free. It should be, it's not hard to provide. And I wish I could bring everybody that I serve through the process it takes to ensure that at midnight they can flush their toilet, because I guarantee you, we've had people out in bomb cyclones trying to start up pumps so that people can flush their toilet at 1 a.m. We've had people working all weekend to make sure that this well is up and running so that people can wash their dishes. So it's a hard, dirty business. But our job is done best when people never know that we're there, when they don't experience those interruptions.
And because I'm in education, one of the things that I really stress for teachers is the importance that people understand the systems and how they work. And there are you guys are doing such a great job that there is an unconsciousness about what's required and what's involved. And it becomes kind of this sense of expectation or entitlement without the responsibility. And I do feel like we need to do a better job of bridging that gap, and making everyone stakeholders in the preservation, conservation, and continued assurance of water for the future.
I agree with you.
it's every person's job.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Are there are there any questions for Vanessa and these burial options?
I've got a question, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
great. Great.
So I just pulled up on one of my other screens the geez, what is it? The natural funeral.
Mhm.
And so how hard is it to, like, you know, say, I don't know, say my dog dies and I want to make him into a tree. Is there a huge long waiting list? Because there's only one company in Colorado that does that. I mean, how popular is it? Do you have to, like, put your name on the list 10 years before you die to make sure that there's a composting bin for you when you kick it, or how does that work?
Well, every funeral provider has pre-planning options, right? So they'll work with you at any stage, and I actually encourage people to make these decisions and have these conversations before you need them, because you know, you want to make the best decision you can. And so when things are urgent and in a crisis is not that time. So I encourage people to decide ahead of time, meet with pre-planners at funeral providers if you can. Right now, no, there's not a long waiting list because people, our culture is death phobic. Nobody likes to talk about it. Nobody likes to think about it. Nobody likes to plan for it. So no, people are not beating down the doors of funeral providers because of that fact. So you know, it is a new thing. The Natural Funeral in Lafayette, Colorado, does offer the natural organic reduction, as well as the water cremation, the green burial. I have a nonprofit group called the Colorado End-of-Life Collaborative, and they're one of our members, so I know them pretty well. And you know, right now that option is running about $8,000, which is cheaper than some traditional burials, but I think it will actually come down in price as well, just because it's new technology, you know. But as far as I know, no, there are no waiting lists right now, just because of our death phobic culture. People
Okay.
don't like to talk about it or anything. So yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Is-
So I'm looking at the price list right now, and
Uh-huh.
the body composting is running about 10,000.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of the problem that we have in the electric vehicle market, is doing the thing that's sustainable is sometimes more expensive, you know, because fire cremation is $4,500. And
That's
if, you know, if you don't plan for this, and if it is kind of, you know, mom or grandma just passed away, we got to do something with her, fire cremation could be the thing, even though it's the worst for our environment. So
right.
hopefully at some point, you know, those lines cross and we get to where the more sustainable option is also the least expensive option. Then you're really going to see a shift in and a change in people's behavior. I always know in my industry, the thing that the catalyst to change is the financial part of it. So if you can make, you know, the price of using too much water exorbitant, then people will start conserving water.
Right.
Vanessa, is it legal to bury grandma in the backyard?
Not exactly. Not exactly. No, you have to, there are laws around that. So you have to ask. If you have, you know, a 50-acre farm, it might be possible, but there are definitely laws around it.
Because that's a green burial.
Yes, but you have to have permission for that on your land. Yeah.
Even though it's your land, you have to have permission.
Yeah.
And who grants that permission?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's an area that I'm not familiar with. Not exactly sure on that one.
Of these options, you know, the water cremation, and what is your preference? I'm just curious.
My preference is composting, 100%. Yeah, natural organic reduction, just because I mean, it is the best for our planet. It's the most sustainable. It actually, it's not that it doesn't do any harm, it actually regenerates the earth and allows things to grow. So that's my preference. And probably be the Colorado Burial Preserve that I mentioned out in Florence. It's got a beautiful view of the mountains and it's just a beautiful place. And I'm really interested in conservation efforts. And the thing that I tell people, it's like, you know, you want to pay attention to the last chapter of your life, just like you have all along, and say, if somebody has been working, you know, for climate justice or has been interested in conservation efforts all their life, and then they end with a traditional burial, it just doesn't make a lot of sense with the rest of their life. So I always try and make sure that people are informed about their decisions and are making the choice that makes the most sense for them. And, you know, hopefully, like Heather said, the price will come down. I think it will, just because it's new technology, and you know how things are when they're brand new, and there aren't a lot of providers. I think that price will come down, and I think more people will do it, because, you know, it used to be nobody did fire cremation until the 80s, and the price came down, and then more people did. And for some reason, people seem to think it was better ecologically, but it's not. So I try and let people know that too. So I just like for people to be informed about the choices that they make. Yeah.
Yeah, I really did make the assumption that fire cremation was more environmentally. So I'm really glad to have that challenged.
I think they told you that, I think. I think that was kind of promoted. Yeah.
Well, it just is like in terms of space around the earth, you know, if we all are going in these steel caskets, you know, you obviously you then can't grow things where those caskets are.
Right.
So it's just like, how many cemeteries are we going to have? How many cemeteries do we need? So it appeared initially from an efficiency standpoint to be a good alternative. But how long does a fire cremation take
To perform?
Yeah.
You know, not that long, maybe 6 to 8 hours, but the real concern is the fossil fuels that are needed to run the crematorium, first of all, and then all the toxic chemicals that are put into the air.
Yeah.
And also, I'll just say that cremains are toxic. So people that spread like ashes, they're not ashes, they're actually bone fragments. So when they're spreading them into water, that's not good for the little things that live in the water, you know, or in the ocean or whatever. So that's something else that most people don't know, is that cremains are toxic.
Yeah, I planted my mom's cremains with a tree and the tree died, so I can attest to that. Yeah.
That's what happens. Exactly. So anything that says, oh, we can turn you into a tree, well, not exactly. You know, you got to have other things with it. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that Colorado has so many options. I don't know who's responsible for that, but if you've had anything to do with that, thank you. And certainly thank you for helping to educate people on those options. And it wasn't included in my plans, but it is now after, you know, hearing from you. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, you know, don't feel bad about things that happened in the past. You know, they're like, oh, we cremated grandma or whatever. I mean, just know that there are new options now. And once you know about them, explore them a little bit and see what feels best to you and what makes the most sense, you know, for our environment and that kind of thing. Because these are all new. They're new things. And so not all of them were available before. So yeah, if this prompts somebody to do some more research, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think water cremation might be, you know, my top favorite of these alternatives. I don't know. Yeah, there's something about just the element of water
Yeah.
that interacts to reduce you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, are there any other questions from our participants? And if there are, we'll go to those. And if there are not, then we'll do a kind of closing thoughts. Okay. All right. Well, closing thoughts from our panelists. And Vanessa, how about we start with you? And I guess I would say, if you can share too, what are the best ways to make the decision? Like, is there a resource that we can go to help make this decision? So when we're communicating with our loved ones, what we want to have happen, can we direct them somewhere? And also, how do you, like sometimes you have this contract with the funeral parlor and you pay for that in advance and there's a package. Do you do that with these kind of burials?
Mm-hmm. Yes. They
Okay.
all have pre-planners on staff. So here in Denver, the Natural Funeral is a great place. Feldman Mortuary is a great place. Beatrix Cremation, Seven Stones out at Roxborough. They all have pre-planning things that you can do. I would just encourage people to research it for themselves. Greenburialcouncil.org is a good place to go if you want to investigate it a little bit. If you're just looking to have a conversation with your loved ones about it, which is I highly recommend, you can go to the conversationproject.org and they have actual templates for conversations. How do you start? What do you say? If they respond this way, what do you say? Just because it's so difficult for us to talk about it in a death phobic culture. And so to even talk about what your final disposition options are is an obstacle. It's a struggle for a lot of people. So the Conversation Project is really good for that. That's a website you can go to. I would just encourage people to talk to at least one person about something that you heard from me that you never knew about before, because I'm really in the business of spreading the word because most people don't know these things. And Colorado is a global leader in these options. So most people don't know that either. But if you can just talk to at least one person, that would be fantastic. And even better, if you decided for yourself what you want and take steps to make sure that happens, like even if it's just writing it down somewhere on a sticky note on your last will and testament. I mean, you can do an advanced care directive and make it official and that kind of thing. You can go to pre-planners at funeral homes and make it official. But if you, even in Colorado, if you just write it down, it's a gift that you give to your loved ones, that they don't have to go, oh my gosh, what do we do? Now we don't know what they wanted, right? Because you never had that conversation. So I would just really encourage people to talk to somebody about it. Even better, write it down. Even better, make plans, all those things. But if you can just have a conversation with somebody, that would be more than most people do. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Vanessa, would you put whatever contact information if people have further questions for you, or if they find themselves in need of a death doula,
Yeah,
or want to learn a little bit more about that too? Because that is what you provide in those final stage processes is really fascinating too.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. And you, Heather.
Okay. I guess my parting thoughts, or one thing I would challenge people to do, is take a critical look at your outdoor landscaping. Is it what you want it to be? Is it native? Is it low water use? If not, what can you change? There are resources out there. One of them in particular is resourcecentral.org. They have fantastic programs. One of them is called Slow the Flow, where you can sign up to have somebody come out and audit your irrigation system. Make sure you have the right sprinkler heads. Make sure they're timed properly, meaning the zones come on and spray for the right amount of minutes based on the plant material, that you've got proper coverage, that they're not, double spraying. Another program they have is called Garden in a Box. I've used this 5 times, where I take out grass and I replace it with xeriscape plants, mulch, xeriscape plants, maybe a big rock. And just gradually over the years, I just start pulling out my grass. And it's really cool. They provide 15 to 30 different plants that are all xeriscape. Some are deer resistant. A lot of them are hardy to 7,000 feet in elevation. And then they provide also a planting guide. If you have a triangular piece, this is where you would plant the stuff based on the heights and the blooming and the colors and stuff like that. So it's really kind of a no-brainer. You don't have to go to Lowe's and wander through the aisles and think, oh, should I put this in that garden? It's right there. 20 plants, they tell you where to plant them. They tell you how far apart to plant them. Boom. You've taken a small step to reducing your water consumption. And if we all just took a small step every year, we'd be in a good place in a couple of years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patrick, do you want to?
Yeah, unmuting. So we'll start with some small things that we can all sort of do. And I, as I was mentioning, it's like trying to reduce the number of basically trips that we're taking, and doing that in a environmentally friendly fashion if we can. But really, like, if we can eliminate trips, that's something that we can all sort of start thinking about and trying to do. And I think sometimes when the gas prices spike and they're like $4 and $5 a gallon, it encourages us to do that for financial reasons. But if we're looking at it for environmental reasons, it doesn't matter if gas is $5 a gallon or $1.50 a gallon. We should sort of start thinking about it in the same way. I think transportation overall, I believe it's something like 20% of our overall carbon footprint globally. So the changes that we make can have huge impacts. And then locally, those type of things, like just within Denver has, consistently been in one of the top 10 worst air quality cities in the US because of the ozone throughout the summer. And we get those alerts, to avoid driving on certain days. So those are the type of things that we can always look at. And if in the big picture, if you are thinking about switching to an EV, I dropped my email address in there. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll help you find those tax incentives for e-bike or a car or whatever. I can, I do this constantly. I help provide people advice on what EVs that they should be looking at, but also to help get rid of some of the myths around EVs. I've heard it all, a lot of them from my brother, who we'll just say he was politically opposite from me and doubted everything I ever said about EVs, but he just bought his own EV late last year, and he had some of the same myths. It's like, you can't drive it that far because it takes 8 hours to recharge every time. No, it doesn't. On the road trips, we stop generally about 30 minutes per stop to recharge. And while we're recharging, we can go to the bathroom, we can get something to eat. So in the end, our stops are about the same as in a gas car. He also came up with the myth of making the battery on your EV is worse than all the gas you'll ever use in a gas car, and which is completely false. It's using more materials out of the ground, but there's two things. One, the payback period from the carbon emissions of creating an EV, you pay that back within 2 to 4 years, depending on what EV you get. So after 2 or 4 years, you're doing better than you were if you would have bought just a gas car, and it will continually do better and better. And then, of course, the big myth is well, it doesn't matter if you drive an EV, it's still powered by coal. And of course, to some extent, that's true. I think in Colorado, coal is still the primary source of electricity. But on the flip side, Colorado has reached about 40% of its electricity is from renewable sources, so wind or solar. So that's right now, and it's getting better and better. Here in San Diego, we're at 55% of our electricity is from renewable sources. And there's actually times like in the middle of the day, in beginning parts of June when it's 70 degrees, not 90 degrees, where we literally produce more solar than the grid can even take from home solar and solar farms and stuff like that. So I have it set up so that I can charge during those times and use my solar that's on the roof and not use any energy from the grid. So that trip that I was talking about, I was using a lot of energy. Yes, I use a lot of energy, but thankfully it was 100% solar. So and then the other thing is like, because I always hear people aren't ready to make the switch. As you're going throughout your life over the next month, how many times did you drive more than 100 miles? Because a lot of people have range anxiety. Can an EV drive me far enough? Pretty much every EV out there will do over 100 miles. We've tested ones that get close to 400 miles. Ours does about 270 miles. But just sort of even make a note, like how many times did I drive in a single day and it was over 100 miles? More than likely, it's not that many. So that's one thing. And then also in that same time period, every time you went to a gas station, make note of that. Like you don't have to, I know it's raining a lot in Denver right now. You don't have to like, it's raining and I got to get gas today because I didn't get it yesterday because it was lightly raining. You never, like if you can get charging at home, you can charge at home in the garage. You never have to worry about that. Every single day you leave home with a full tank. So it's like, those type of things sort of start getting in your mind the advantages of an EV and sort of not disregarding, but being aware of like that the disadvantages of an EV aren't necessarily as big as people make them out to be. It's sort of interesting because as an EV coach in Drive Electric Colorado, I used to tell people like our car has 270 miles of range, and people would go, "Ooh, that's it. That's not very far." So then I figured out, I was like, I thought it was far because most of the time I don't want to drive 270 miles. I want to stop before then and go to the bathroom. So then I would give the example of like we took multiple trips from Denver to San Diego or Denver to Las Vegas. And I would say like we left home and the first place we had to stop was in Glenwood Springs. And we would stop there and charge there right outside of Target. And they're going, wow, you made it all the way to Glenwood Springs? Well, that's about 184 miles from our house in Denver to Glenwood Springs. So sometimes like the numbers don't sound huge. Everybody wants 300 miles, 500 miles of range. But the reality is like you drive from Denver to Glenwood Springs, you'll probably want to take a bathroom break, especially if you wake up and drink a lot of coffee like I do. So anyways, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. It's Patrick at EVexplored. We Liv and I both love talking about this stuff. We make tons of videos about it. We're doing literally 1 to 2 videos a week on all aspects of EVs, from e-bikes to electric car reviews. We're going to review a Lexus this week, so we're really excited. And even more exciting than that, I was talking about used EVs, and literally right during this call, I got word a friend is leaving Fort Collins, Colorado. He's towing with his electric truck. He's towing a Nissan Leaf that he bought for less than $4,000, and he's going to drop it off with us to use and make videos. So electric trucks are very cool. They can tow, and we're going to get a very cheap used EV to play around with and make videos and actually use. It'll be very nice to, run to the dentist and take the $4,000 electric car. So, anyways, reach out to me if you have any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. You mentioned the equity aspect of all of this, and I really appreciate that because I sometimes and I had invited one of the panelists from the Latino community that was talking about what in the environmental impact on marginalized communities. And it's really significant, and it doesn't get the attention that it needs.
And there's some good advantages because some of these underserved communities hopefully will have far less pollution. I mean, we've all been in downtown Denver and you just have everybody idling at stoplights, and hopefully that type of stuff will improve. But there has to be something done with the charging infrastructure, making chargers accessible. One of the things about the federal funding was announced last year, it's going to fund a lot of chargers, and one of the requirements they have is that they have to have credit card readers, and that is because they don't want you to be beholden to like all of these different charging companies and having to install 20 different apps on your phone, because that's how a lot of them activate. So they're going to have a credit card reader. But somebody just brought up to me, it was like, yeah, but what about people that are bankless? And I was like, yeah, I know there's a certain percentage, but I was surprised at the numbers. And I think it was 8.6% of African American households are bankless. So it's like, how are they going to even do something like charge? They can't run into a gas station and go like, give me $5 and pump 3 when it's not attended and there's no way to insert cash into the machine. So something I never thought about, but now I'm going to bring up that question.
Mm-hmm. And I know in the Colorado legislature, one of the bills that they passed this year was to ensure that there was clean water in the mobile home parks, because they haven't had, it's not regulated the same as when a house is built there and it's on the ground and you own the ground. So there are some things being done, but there's an enormous gap. And unfortunately, a lot of times I think we're not hearing from those voices. So I appreciate that. I was doing yoga in the park the other day and I saw this community on e-bikes. And I just had this image comparison of like Harley riders, all leathered up, and the contrast between all these e-bikes. And I thought, well, here comes our future.
It's really interesting, like seeing it out here, because I believe last year in Colorado, there was 10% of new car sales were EV. Out here, it's hit 17%. Wow. And e-bikes everywhere. So you go down to the beach and teenagers on up to, and I think it's actually sort of great. Like I've seen, like they must be like 75-year-old elderly couples on an e-bike with their surfboard, and I'm like, that's life goals right there.
Yes, definitely.
And they have the e-bike with the surfboard holder on it. It's just it's awesome.
Yeah, I think there's simple things that we can all do. There's a Littleton gardening gang here headed up by Betty Harris. And, for those folks that have issues where they're not able to take care of their yards, they have a terminal illness, or they've had a spouse die or something. We partner with the city, and the city a lot of times will provide like the trucks that do haul away the materials, but we just have volunteers that go in and help do the cleanups and things like that. We do plant exchanges, and there's just a lot of creative and inexpensive ways that we can support each other, both planet and people. So thank you for the recommendations for the little changes and big changes we can make. I know that my next car is going to be an electric car. And I think that this is just such an important topic and one that affects everybody. So thank you for your time tonight. Those that have joined, thank you for being part of this community conversation, and make sure you write down the contacts in the chat section. I'll leave this up for a little bit in case people need more time. And I just want to say thank you and have a great night.
Thank you.
Right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys. Heather, Patrick, Vanessa, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks
you.
For
Thanks for inviting
so
us.
much fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.